Buenos dias.
One can easily describe Grim Fandango as a wonderful blend of style, solid writing, pretty weird puzzles, and above all, great atmosphere. But one would also feel obliged to immediately dive in a bit deeper into the several details of these characteristics in order to better drive home the message of how truly awesome and unique this adventure game actually is, and answer the question, is it a classic? Grim Fandango takes place in an Aztec-inspired land of the dead, as seen through the lens of noir films from the 1940s. This 8th underworld is a realm where the characters live and mostly work in a carbon copy version of the real world, or at least a 1940s version of the world, as a means of eventually getting to rest on the 9th level.
I can't leave here until I've worked off a little debt to the powers that be.
It appears that not only is the soul indeed immortal, but so is capitalism. The characters are in fact the souls of the dead, who have taken the form of calaca figures inspired by Mexican Day of the Dead traditions. Depending on the type of life they lived, souls can qualify for a variety of modes of transportation to take them to their eternal resting place: car, boat, or train, thus limiting the amount of time they have to stay in the 8th underworld. Those who did not lead a kind life are mainly stuck to traveling the distance on foot, having to face the many dangers of the trip, things like flying spiders and flaming beavers. And that last one is not a euphemism. In many cases, the souls lose hope in ever finishing their journey, and some even stop believing in the existence of this final realm of rest altogether, and instead resign themselves to unliving on this 8th underworld plane of existence. You play as Manny Calavera, a Grim Reaper tasked with bringing the souls of the recently deceased into the land of the dead and giving them access to the type of transportation they qualify for. Grim Reapers not only ferry your soul, but they also act as travel agents.
Sorry, Bruno, but you didn't qualify for anything better. But here, have this complimentary mug.
Quite quickly though, you stumble onto a massive conspiracy that takes you on your own trip through the underworld, meeting a lot of interesting characters along the way, making a great friend called Glottis, who is an elemental demon summoned to drive cars, and having to solve some really obtuse puzzles along the way. The theme and setting would have been a massive wasted opportunity if the writing would have been subpar, but thankfully that is not the case. The writing is a pleasure to listen to, and it's made that much better thanks to the stellar voice acting. The game is littered with all sorts of jokes and references, none of them standing out as fourth wall breaking or out of place.
My scythe. I like to keep it next to where my heart used to be.
What does stand out in a positive way is that several Latino voice actors were cast in these roles, which adds a layer of authenticity to the dialogue, not only because of the accent but also thanks to them using Spanish words intermingled with the English dialogue, so as to better reflect how bilingual people actually speak.
Stuck selling walking sticks to a bunch of burros for eternity. Gladys, are you loco? Don't ask, carnal.
One other major characteristic of Grim Fandango stems from its very name. While things in it aren't exactly grim per se, the game is infused with an almost joyful amount of dark humor.
Slave labor, Manny. That's the real ticket to success.
For instance, you may notice and wonder why the characters smoke and drink. In fact, Manny's AFK animation is him lighting up a smoke, and there is at least one puzzle that requires you to drink something.
Ah, Marillo de Oro. A very fine liqueur filled with solid gold flakes.
They drink and smoke a lot because that's what all characters seem to do in noir movies and almost never get drunk except for when the story requires it. On top of that, they're already dead, so it's not like they're jeopardizing their health or anything. These activities help humanize the characters while at the same time underlining the sublime absurdity of what is happening. As for the second part of the title, a fandango can be both a type of a song as well as a dance originating from the Iberic Peninsula. I believe in this case it is used in the sense of a dance from the Spanish origins, which makes it a fairly lively dance between a him and a her, during which they flirt with each other back and forth through both movement of the arms, clothes, and obviously legs. A decidedly ungrim endeavor, but associating the two words in the title of the game is meant to message the odd and absurd nature of what it contains. Plus, it sounds dope. Grim Fandango. This special mix of Aztec mythology, Mexican traditions, and film noir, with the help of very well written and performed characters, works incredibly well to create a supremely engrossing world and narrative. And this atmosphere is perfectly complemented by the wonderful music and score. Grim Fandango's score has just as much character as Manny does, mostly because it follows him throughout the story and does a great job at completing the wonderfully weird atmosphere created by the art style and the proceedings overall. The song list is a solid blend of jazz, big band swing, orchestral tunes, noir film score, plus the occasional mariachi style song, and you'll grow to either love or hate certain songs depending on how much time you spend on any given head-scratchingly dense puzzle. In 2015, a remastered version of the game was released, which added to and enhanced the original experience in a fairly special way, because the remaster was made by many of the same people who had worked on the original. The remastered score, for instance, is considerably more layered than the original, current technology allowing for the more complex and bit-dense symphony background to actually exist in tandem with the already stellar music I've been listening to for the past 2 decades. Originally, many corners had to be cut during game development to work within the technological limitations of the time, but with the remastered version, they were able to finally do the thing as they initially envisioned it. One major mechanical difference the remastered version brings to the table, besides the sharper looking character models, is that it turns the game into a point-and-click adventure. Originally, the game featured tank controls, which meant that you controlled Manny from the keyboard and his head would turn towards items you could pick up and use. This made the entire experience of playing a rather long and sometimes tedious one, even frustrating, seeing as how on several occasions Manny's head would slide from one important point to another and you'd either miss a piece of a puzzle or simply miss time and action and have to redo it. Mind you, this last part can also happen with the point-and-click approach, but it wouldn't be due to the controls themselves.
I've just locked an open door. Strange, yet symbolically compelling.
There is a special achievement in it for you if you finish the game using only the tank controls, but sorry, I paid my dues many years ago. I wasn't going to miss out on point-and-clicking my way through the Land of the Dead this time. When it comes to the graphics overhaul, the models now have super sharp margins and corners, even though many aspects of the surrounding world are still pixelated due to the various implementation restriction reasons. They couldn't literally rebuild the game engine from the ground up. These discrepancies are mostly visible when it comes to specific puzzle-related animations, where there's a stark contrast between the original setting and the new models. Nothing too distracting though. One really cool feature that was in the original game, which still exists in the remastered version, is something that you don't see during play, but it's something I always liked. It's a feature that shows you your progress through the story. When saving or loading a game, you'll be presented with the saves, obviously, but also with a large image created in the same Aztec-inspired illustration style. The image will light up as you advance through the story, the idea being that the illustration itself represents the major things that happen throughout the game. It's nothing game-changing or which influences one's gameplay experience, it's simply one of those little touches which I simply found fascinating. It looks great, and it's a nice hidden sort of feature to let you know how far into the game you actually are. Grim Fandango Remastered doesn't only come with a different control scheme, more complex soundtrack, and crisp models, it also comes with a bunch of other special features, like the option of playing the game in widescreen. Even though it does stretch the image, I prefer to play it in the original scale but with borders, since playing it with black borders can be quite strenuous on the eyes after a time. There's also a cool gallery of concept art which you unlock as you advance through the story, but most importantly and interestingly, the bonus features include a developer commentary. Once switched on, at certain times during the game, you'll have the option of turning on the commentary and you'll hear one or more of the team involved in the development of the original game talking about particular challenges or giving context to the various sections of the game that you are traversing. Listening to the dev commentary on a game is interesting by itself because of the very nature of what type of game Grim Fandango is and the team behind it, but it is also interesting from a gaming history point of view, since you get a much better sense of the types of limitations and workarounds developers had to deal with decades ago. So now comes the question, what maketh a video game a classic? Some would say it's subjective, some would say it depends, and there's definitely something to be said about subjective classics, which is something I talk about in this series as well. But in order for a game to be an objective classic, it has to be considered to be good over a period of time, has to be remembered as such, and also it has to stand up to current day scrutiny. And I also consider that 10 years is the minimum period required for such a hindsight-based judgment to take place. In this case, it's been more than 20. I must have played through Grim Fandango about 3 to 4 times in various chunks during the past 20 years. And Grim Fandango Remastered makes adventuring through the Land of the Dead easier, better looking and sounding than it ever was. Not to mention that you don't need to switch CDs while playing it. Yeah, that used to happen back then, and look, if you're into the retro experience, then by all means you do you. I prefer the convenience. Even though some of the puzzles are quite mindfucky, nowadays finding solutions to particularly annoying ones isn't a problem, and their difficulty doesn't take anything away from the awesome atmosphere that is present all throughout the game. Grim Fandango fared very well critically, but not so well financially. Its failure to turn a massive profit being seen by many in the industry at the time as the sign of shifting interest away from adventure games and towards action games. That being said, thanks to the indie revival of adventure games in the 2010s and to the strong community that built around the game in the decade plus following its release, the game got its remastered version, which not only allows you to play the game as originally intended, but also as a point-and-click adventure. As a result, the game is very much still playable for modern audiences, even though, I have to be honest, it still encapsulates where adventure games were at that particular point in time. Nowadays, game design has been taken into different directions, so there will be some puzzles that are quite obtuse. On a more personal note, when I first played Grim Fandango, sometime in the autumn of 2000, is when I realized that video games can be more. They can be more than an amusing pastime or entertainment. The game made me understand that you can tell truly weird and wonderful stories with this medium, that video game music can stand on its own, that interacting with writing is a new and cooler way of engaging with a story as opposed to simply reading a book. Grim Fandango showed me that video games can be art. It is one of my favorite games ever, so there is no doubt in my mind that Grim Fandango is a true classic of the genre and also of video games in general. And thanks to the remastered version, it can be more easily discovered by new generations of gamers who might not have gotten word of it otherwise. In case you're interested in some other adventure games, I have a playlist on screen that will help you with that. Thank you very much for watching. I've been StefaNonsense, I have a Patreon, have a great rest of your day, and see you in my next video.